Good afternoon. I'm Karen Kirkham, Chairman of the JCT, and it's my very great pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you John Riches, who is a Chartered Surveyor, an arbitrator, a member of the JCT Council and Board, and is also Vice Chair of the JCT Drafting Sub-Committee. It's fair to say that he didn't produce the Target Cost Contract, which we've just published, on his own, but it's been a passion project for John for quite a few years now. So he's the ideal person to be introducing our new contract. So I'm going to ask you a number of questions, John, and I'm sure you'd be delighted to enlighten us on all these points about TCC. I personally am very excited and we're already starting to mention to clients that they might consider using it in the very near future. So why has JCT decided now to produce a target cost contract?
We felt the marketplace was right for something a bit different, and what's changed since we did 2016 is the level of risk in the industry, and it's prevalent in terms of the number of bankruptcies, and some people are just taking too much risk. So we thought we'd try and find a way to balance the risk across the contract. We've also had demand from law firms and the like, because there are other versions of target cost in the marketplace which are different to ours. So we've had a lot of demand from lawyers. There's been a lot of coverage in magazine articles, all of it very complimentary, thank goodness. And in the first 2 months since we went into print on this contract, we've sold about 10% of the sales of the D&B contract, and the D&B contract is our most popular, so we've made a 10% penetration in the marketplace from scratch, which we're quite pleased with.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, we're pleased with that. It shows an interest, if nothing else. So we think the industry is ready to move from other systems of target cost or cost plus, and we hope that we've pitched it right and we're in the right place in the marketplace at the right time.
So, I mean, I can personally vouch for that. I've Googled around before coming here today and found a lot of coverage, a lot of leading law firms publishing articles about the new contract, setting up seminars, large quantity surveying firms covering it. Obviously, slightly as a selling opportunity for their own services, but it's great to see so much coverage out there, pages and pages and pages of it. So how does the TCC fit in with the rest of the JCT suite?
I hate to say this, some people might find us boring, because what we try and do is repeat everything that people are familiar with, so they're comfortable with it. So when you move across our suite, you have familiarity as a comfort zone. And this contract is based on the JCT Design and Build contract with the features from the Prime Cost contract. So it's a mixture of those two, so if you're familiar with either of those, it will be like a comfortable pair of slippers. You will fit into it very easily and very quickly.
So you're gently cajoling people down this particular route with what they're familiar with?
The great thing is that you don't have to force people to buy our contracts. The last NBS survey on contracts in use, we were still way out there in front in terms of building contracts. And we're already at the point, if we've gone from scratch to 10% of D&B sales, there's got to be an interest, and part of the interest is, well, blimey, it's JCT, we all know that, so we can use it. So I think that's probably where it goes for a start.
I hate to say this, but there is a novelty element, and it's nice to have a new contract on your bookshelves if you're that sort of person, which you and I both are, John. So is it a matter of intellectual interest? Because the market perception is that target cost is very, very difficult and complicated to use. Is this, I mean, a client, it was apropos of an engineering project, but they asked me to explain target costs to them, and having had a look at the relevant contract, I kind of gave up on the point. Is this contract easy to use?
Well, the first thing we did was look at everybody else's, and we thought, well, and target cost, generally speaking, is not particularly popular in the marketplace because there is a bit more admin in it. So what we did was we tried to design a contract where the admin would flow and to try and make it easy. And I'll explain the two parts in a moment. But what we have done to ease the passage is we have a hub on our website which gives worked examples. There's some video. There's a whole live guide, as it were, to how to do a guide. It's I was going to say it's almost a YouTube of using a contract. I don't know if it's quite that, but it's almost
An Instagram, yes.
Or an Instagram of using the contract. So, and the hub is there, and we would invite everybody to look at the hub, to try and use it, and importantly, give us feedback, because it's got a feedback facility. And what we will do in the first instance, in all probability, is if there are the right questions, is feed the hub a bit more to cover the areas that people are finding difficulty with. And if you just think of target cost this simply, and the clue is in the name, the target is what would have been the contract sum in D&B. And we're not going to pay that target, we're going to use it as a benchmark against which everything else happens. So, and that target is adjusted in the same way that the traditional contract sum is. So if there's changes or loss and expense or fluctuations, the target changes according to those. And everybody who administers a contract is familiar with extensions of time, loss and expense, variation, changes, fluctuations. So all of that side is very ordinary and very normal. The interesting bit is the other bit, the cost. So, and it's called a target cost contract. Now, what we actually pay is the cost. We pay something that we've called the allowable cost, and hopefully, if the risk share is correct and the budgets are correct, the allowable cost will be less than the target cost. And the bit in the middle is a difference, and that difference is shared. So there's benefit in both parties working towards administering the contract correctly in terms of the target and monitoring the allowable costs correctly, so there's a comfortable share which they then share out. So that share in effect is the risk reduction element. So I read one article which says, gosh, there's a lot of admin in that, but we'll come on to that in a minute.
Well, there's a lot of admin in all contracts. So yeah. Just to recap on the assistance available, John, as usual with a new contract, we've got this lovely document, which is the guide.
Pristine.
Yes, this has just arrived in the post now in my office. So that's the Target Cost Contract Guide, and there's one for the subcontract as well. But we don't just have that. When we go to the JCT corporate site, I have looked at it and it's online now, and one of the first things you see on the corporate site is this great big spread on the target cost contract, and you drill down into that and you've got guidance, you've got worked examples, you've got videos that are going to be on there, and feedback, and eventually from the feedback there's going to be FAQs which people will be asking as the feedback comes in. Is that the idea?
I was almost going to say it's an idiot's guide, but I know there are no idiots in the construction industry, so there are people who are very familiar with these things. My personal view is the first place you look, and remember this, you're trying to administer a contract, is you look in the contract. And then when you get stuck, you go to the hub to look for guidance, and that would be my discipline, because I think what we've tried to do in the whole of the 2024 suite is to keep it simple, and most people who are familiar with these contracts will be able to read this contract and pick most of it up. So I would read contract first and then hub if I'm stuck would be. But please, everybody, if you've got anything to tell us, there's feedback on that hub, let us have it, because we want to get to a situation, and particularly with this contract, we're dealing with stuff live, as it were, and responding to what the industry needs. So that's the hope. And we haven't had anything by way of feedback yet, because we haven't sold enough yet, but we will, I'm sure.
But all you out there listening today, there is room for feedback on the website. So who exactly is this target cost aimed at? I mean, presumably not somebody doing a minor works job.
No, I wouldn't start at minor works. I think, and I would say, I would pitch it above intermediate contract as well. So it's largish contracts, it's office blocks, it's hospitals, it's any of those sorts of things. It could be used on a very large housing contract where you would normally use a main contract. And one of the great things about housing contracts and the like is the repetition. So once you get into a pattern of dealing with it, it becomes easier. So, but we are talking about biggish contracts, and we stopped giving figures in our contracts some time ago.
I think we're talking north 5 million. That's my personal,
I would
personal reaction to that.
Absolutely say that. I'd have said 6 for a start, just to add another million to it. But and the way to look at it really is as you select the contract to see where you can get the most benefit. And if you're dealing with large sums and prospectively there's going to be a decent difference between allowable cost and target cost, there's a benefit.
I mean, can I just throw this into the equation? What procurement method are we talking about here? Because is it equally usable with D&B or a traditional method with limited design? What's your opinion?
No, it's the contract is set at D&B, and the reason it's set at D&B is that D&B is now our most popular selling contract. The whole industry has gone D&B mad, and unfortunately part of the problem with risk is D&B, because people never fully appreciate the risk of D&B. So it's a D&B contract, and you're either going to do full design or slightly less than full design. You wouldn't use it in the same place that you would a contractor design portion, where the rest of the works is a lump sum price. This is not a lump sum contract. It's an adjustable contract in terms of the target, and it's a floating contract in terms of the allowable cost versus the target.
So in other words, it's a single point responsibility contract, but mitigating the cost risk.
Correct. We've tried to, and I think when you mitigate the cost risk, fingers crossed when I say this, I'm hoping it's going to breed more cooperation in the industry, because both parties have got a real interest in the outcome, other than the building that they get at the end, obviously, but the financial outcome both parties have an interest in, and depending on how they split the sharing of the difference, if it were 50-50, for example's sake, and we've got some wonderful tables for in the front of the contract to insert share levels, but if it was a straight 50-50, there's an equal interest in the outcome. It's as simple as that.
So I hesitate to use the word partnering in connection with contracts. We've not gone there, but it's a collaborative contract.
We've got a partnering contract. The constructing excellence contract is a partnering contract. The reality is it doesn't sell much, and this has sold more
already
in 2 months than that's sold in its
that's really interesting.
Whole history. So, I hesitate. We've actually now put clauses in all of our contracts which deals with duties to cooperate and collaboration. I think it's overemphasised, collaboration. At the end of the day, if you don't collaborate, you can't manage the project and do it anyway. So I wonder whether it's necessary to make big statements on collaboration when you've both got a stake in this.
Because the adversarial model doesn't really work. Well, we've seen that time and time again in the industry. So to summarise, what are the chief benefits of doing it like this?
I think the chief benefits are there's more focus for a start, because you've actually got to administer the contract properly in terms of adjusting the target, and also administer it properly in terms of watching the allowable cost. So that requires focus. There's incentive in terms of if you follow the focus, and heaven forbid, I'm a quantity surveyor. I spent all of my life hoping that one day we'll get the final account on the day we finish the project. And I think we stand more chance with this, because you need to do it to deal with the sharing mechanism. I think there's a positive push in that area where we get to the final answer quicker, because we've both got, it's exciting, isn't it? It's like opening a birthday present. You want to know what the answer is at the end. So I think there's a push there. I'm hoping that as a consequence of the need to keep on top of that admin, that we're going to finish up with some better project management than we see on some jobs. And I think if parties think that they are going to go into this contract and not cooperate and not manage well, they will be disappointed. And not only will they be disappointed, they'll have a muddle they'll have to untangle at the end. This is a contract which requires you to be live, and if you're live and keep on top of both sides of the equation, there's a reward for success. And the reward for success is, it's not just allowable cost versus target cost. I think you get improved cost control as well, because there's an interest to minimise the allowable cost, what you spend, versus the target, because we all get a slice of the cake then. So I think it's, rather than partnering, I would call it a heavily incentivised contract, because there is a real outcome to be shared at the end of the day. So I think it's good from that point of view. It's reward for effort, this contract.
I mean, looking at this as a lawyer in practice, it occurs to me that this contract is perhaps a candidate for some workshopping of the stakeholders, the contract administrator, the employer, the contractor, when they start one of these for the first time, to make sure they've all got the message.
I've spent a lot of my career, particularly with contractors, trying to insist that one of their most valuable assets is training. And there are some people who start partnering and purely partnering contracts on the basis of having a workshop at the start. Now, I'm not against that, but the ones I've seen and dealt with have not been very good. And I think certainly in the early use of this, getting both parties together and explaining how it works and why they must do things would be worthwhile. It will get off to a flying start then. And you could argue that you could do that on every contract. You could even do it on a traditional contract. So it's, and it would reap benefits, so you could argue. But I think because this is slightly different, there might be more demand for workshopping.
Yeah, even if that's a bit of a dirty word. Also, when I'm talking about stakeholders, once again as a lawyer in practice, I do feel that this is going to have to be sold to funders to some extent, because if they don't understand it, if the funder monitor doesn't understand it, that's going to cause a problem as well. So everybody needs to buy into this, the project stakeholders.
No more than any other contract, I think funders often take a narrow view of contracts and don't do very good appraisals, and that's why they finish up in trouble. I think everybody who looks at a project should look at the procurement method, and from a funder's point of view, there's
great advantage.
There's a bonus, because if some money is saved, presumably the employer side won't put it in their pocket. They will take it off of their borrowings. So there's a benefit in terms of saving some money on the project overall, because on the employer's share will go back into the pot.
Can we zoom in a bit more now on the elements of TCC, the costing elements of TCC, the targets, etc.?
Well, the target, and I'd encourage people to look at it in this way. It's called a target sum in the front of the contract, and just think in terms of traditional contracts, it's the contract sum. And all the things that you do to the contract sum, in the way you adjust it, in the way you look for savings or whatever you do, apply to the target. But the target is a nominal figure. It's not the figure that you actually pay. It's the figure that the job would be worth in terms of normal operation of the contract. What's set against that is the allowable cost. And we have a schedule at the back of the contract. And if there's one thing I've learned about writing our contracts from this contract, is that these schedules that separate things out are very useful. It's a good idea, instead of writing long, tortuous clauses, to actually have discrete parts that you can refer to and say, well, we're doing this week. And so in those terms, and we've got a schedule of allowable cost. Allowable cost is not complex. Most contractors will run job costing systems, and the allowable cost can come out of that. And it's a matter of how much audit you need to do in terms to satisfy yourself that somebody's not dumping loads of allowable costs into the allowable cost side. There is a positive discouragement to doing that, because if you mess the allowable cost up and try and use it as a, I'll use the expression hospital job, try and use it as a hospital job, you reduce the share of the difference. So you destroy the purpose of the share. Now, if you just take the allowable cost against the target, and the allowable cost is calculated in accordance with Schedule 2 of the contract, you then take the difference and then you share the difference out. So there's every incentive to get the target right, the allowable cost right, and to have the bit in the middle.
It does require a lot of transparency, open book basis, though, this, doesn't it?
Well,
no hidden discounts? Or do we care?
Well, if anybody, and I hate to say this with such a fine product, if anybody thinks they can fiddle this, they're going to find out it's difficult. It's more difficult than they think, because it's like a jelly in some ways. If you squeeze it in one place, it'll pop out somewhere else. So if you try and load the allowable cost, you lose out on the share. If you try and reduce the target, you'll lose out on the share. So the thing has got to balance. So I don't think this is a contract because of its outcomes, which is very easy to manipulate. It's not very easy to mess up. It's not very easy to ignore the admin, because the admin, particularly in terms of each month, looking at the adjusted target versus the allowable cost, it's got to be there and right and done. So people have got to apply the normal disciplines of running a contract rigorously, I hope. And if they apply them rigorously, they'll come up with an answer, which is good. I don't think that side of it is onerous. It's a comfortable discipline that we should all be doing anyway.
I'd agree with that. I think this brings us naturally on to another question, which is contract administration. How do the professionals handle this? What is the key role?
It's the same in many respects as the traditional contract. The architect or the CA certifies money. They never calculate it. And usually the QS is the person in traditional contracts who calculates it. And I think they will be at the fore of, number one, assisting the CA to adjust the target cost, and number two, to audit the allowable cost. So, and I would caution people to as well as your workshops, I would caution people to, if they're going to have any peculiar demands on being able to order allowable cost, they should go in the prelims or the employer's requirements.
As opposed to?
As opposed to making them up afterwards.
Oh, right, okay. So everything up front?
Yeah. If you want to set parameters for order of allowable cost, they should be in the contract documents.
So things like working hours?
If you want timesheets every week, say so in the, because our contract doesn't stipulate the extent of what you use to justify allowable cost. It identifies what allowable cost is and how you will calculate it. So if you want backup documents, they should be in the employer's requirements, they should be in the documents. We've had this discussion together many times, the importance of the prelims, and we're not very good at it these days, and we've got less good at it when we do design and build. We really need to lay our stall out in the prelims bit of the employer's requirement.
But people keep asking me as a lawyer to stick it in the contract conditions, which I think is wholly wrong, by the way.
Right. There are other contracts in the world, and the problem with sticking admin, and I'll call it admin, in at the contract, is question: does it become a legal obligation? And if you mess the admin up, what's the remedy for breach? There is a place for administrative matters, and it's not in the contract. You don't stipulate nonsense procedures in the contract to make it more complicated, and then to raise the question when people don't do it or do it to perfection, is there a breach or not? All it does is mess things up.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think probably we're talking, probably your contract administrator here is a quantity surveyor, because if it's a D&B type project, it's going to be an employer's, as was employer's agent anyway.
Yes,
normally
yeah. And it's that sort of
surveyor.
discipline that is needed to look at the numbers.
Yeah, that was my impression as well. So how does the process of adjusting the target cost work in practice?
Same as any other contract. So it wouldn't matter if it was a standard building contract. It wouldn't matter if it was a D&B. I love our contracts because we have a step-by-step idiot's guide in our contracts as to how you calculate bits. So if you want to calculate the adjusted contract sum in a target cost or a traditional contract, there's a list, a checklist of requirements. Mm-hmm. The things that you take out, the things that you add in. And as long as you follow that and then follow the rules to do the adjustment, so if you've got a change or a variation, follow those rules, that's the way to do it. So the target is dead easy and not strange.
I prefer to say, if you don't mind, John, that it's not an idiot's guide. The contract is very narrative.
I like idiot's guide. And no, I'll tell you why I say that, because you've got to say to yourself, a narrative is too posh. You've got to say to yourself, if you've got a contract which lays out a checklist, so you can go through that checklist and tick each piece off, it's at low level. It is an idiot's guide at the end of the day. And look at it another way: if you don't follow it, you are an idiot. So it's there for your health, really, to go through the checklist and tick it off. And if you do that, you can't go wrong.
Can I ask you a sort of question out of left field? Because I haven't located this yet in the contract, having not finished my study of the contract. So who takes the risk of supply chain failure in terms of, we've seen people losing a lot of specialists recently, which is very unfortunate.
Still the contractor. Having said that, it's slightly different in this, because if you have a supply chain failure in terms of a subcontractor, the corollary to that is that to finish the works it's going to cost more. So that cost more goes into the allowable cost, because we bung everything into allowable cost. So that cost more then reduces the difference share.
So it's a shared pain as
so
well as a shared
so it's we haven't used deliberately in the contract the expressions pain and gain, but that is what it amounts to in effect. So if something goes wrong, which increases the allowable cost, both sides will be a part of that.
So it's an incentivisation, but it's not punitive.
No. It's not punitive at all. It's. I think people who use this contract need to understand, number one, that if you do this properly, there is potential for gains, and the potential for gains to both means that the risk overall is reduced. You also need to realise if something goes slightly wrong, you're sharing that risk. And that's what it boils down to. But it's still, overall, it's still better that a slightly reduced payout on the different share, it's better than failure, total failure.
Well, I mean, I always apply the principle of herd immunity, which is that if you're going to win the game, if you're an employer, and wipe out the contract, you better hope it's on your project, not somebody else, because you've lost. If people go around wiping out contractors, we saw what happened with John Lang, it's everybody's 12-year warranties going, isn't it? So
I read the Construction Inquirer every day, and that reports on bankruptcies and the likes in the industry. And there's one job in Wales which are now on their third contractor because the other two went bust. Now I suspect that if they'd have addressed a lot of these things up front and used something like this, it wouldn't be such a bad project. So I suspect. So we're reducing the scope overall, I think, if you address the risk properly and share the risk.
Reducing the risk of failure.
You reduce the risk of failure.
So can we zone in a bit more now on the payment process? I'm interested in the concept of the contract fee. Can you explain that one to me?
Well, the contract fee, expressed simply, is the contractor's profit and overheads.
Right.
So if you're paying him, and each month you will pay him his allowable cost, and the allowable cost is what it actually costs, so it's net. And it's net of any profit and overheads. So the contract fee is the bit you add to cover the profit and overheads. It's that simple. So everything else goes into allowable cost, and then you add his head office overheads and profit by way of the contract fee to that figure. So it's ordinary again. You're not paying extra. It's just a way of...
So it's a straightforward swap for the phrase overheads and profit.
Yes, it is.
But
used. The hope is that if allowable cost is going to allow you a margin against the target, it will be a lower level of profit and overheads than you would have paid on an ordinary contract.
I think
this is getting very technical, isn't it?
Very intense.
And very interesting as well, if you're a quantity surveyor, of course.
Well, it's going to be quantity surveyors who
I
are
know,
going to need to do all of that.
So if you take the allowable cost to date for a monthly valuation, plus the contract fee, and set that against the target cost, that gives you the difference. Now the question is, what do you do with that difference when you do a monthly valuation? And we've got a facility in the contract to pay out this year monthly, or to wait to the end. And there were people who thought waiting to the end was a good idea. I personally don't. I would pay it out as you go, because you get better realisation of what your total outlay is going to be. So I think if you do the sharing monthly, and all right, swings and roundabouts, if you have a bad month and a good month, so what, at the end of the day. But the final adjustment for the final account is the properly adjusted target cost versus the allowable cost, plus the contract fee, and then you share the difference. So when you do a final account, you do a final reckoning of all of the swings and roundabouts, and that becomes the final outcome.
And the employer isn't left with a potentially quite big bill at the end if it's been drawn down.
No, it's one of the reasons I favour doing it monthly, that there's no big bills for anybody. That's why I personally favour doing it monthly.
You might get a bit of resistance from funders, I don't know. So what else is in the contract family apart from the main contract, the TCT?
Oh, we've gone to town on the subcontract this time, because we've got what I call a generic subcontract, and it's got 3 heads. There's 3 options in this subcontract. You can have a target cost contract, which mirrors the main contract, in effect, in the way it deals with target cost, target plus allowable cost, and less allowable cost and fee. You can have a lump sum contract, or you can have a remeasurable contract. And I think I can't think of any scope that a main contractor would be missing with those 3 options.
So you don't have to, as it were, step down the benefit to the subcontract. Probably you should.
With all of these things, it's a matter of realistic perspective, and I would say with a very big subcontract, like let's go mad, let's build a hospital, okay? So, and hospitals are heavy on M&E and services, so I would probably let the subcontract for M&E on target cost.
So key subcontractors might be.
Yeah, key, it works. Mm-hmm. It would work. It would, and that would, and again, if you're saving money on the thing overall, that would feed in.
And you've got a chain of incentivisation.
Totally. You're funnily enough, it's a tug of war where you're all pulling the rope in the same direction.
That'd make a nice change.
Yeah.
So, just to recap again, we're coming towards the end of the session now, because I'm seeing appearing on the screen some absolutely fantastic questions.
I'm pleased about that, because the thing is too far away and I can't read it, but carry on.
So just to recap on one particular aspect of the hub, there is for the first time for JCT a feedback area on the hub for this contract specifically. We're doing it as a bit of an experiment.
Correct.
To inform both any FAQs we might need on the hub and any training